Emma did not plan to be anyone's rescuer that summer morning. She wanted a quiet loop above the old terraces, a few hours to stretch her legs and clear out the noise that had been piling up in her head. The sky held that steady pale blue that means heat later. Pines reached up, and the air smelled like warm sap and dust. The trail narrowed, turned, and then she heard a sound that did not belong to hiking or pines or a human trying to breathe after a climb. It was a tight little cry, a ragged sound pressed through a throat that had run out of comfort. Not a bird. Not a child. It came again from below the level of the path. Emma stepped off the track, braced one hand on the stone wall of a ruin, and peered down into a shallow pit where the old steps had collapsed long ago. A lynx crouched in the shade, lean and tense, ears tipped with dark tufts. She lifted one paw toward Emma like a swimmer reaching for a ledge and let out a sound that was closer to a plea than a warning. For a second, Emma's body decided to be afraid, because fear is what you feel when a wild cat stares straight at you from a few feet away. But right behind the fear came something steadier. The animal was not preparing to spring. She was trying to climb and failing. There was grit on her whiskers and a tremor running down her side. Emma knelt. She kept her eyes a little to the side, the way she had once read to do when you want to be present without being a threat. She spoke low and simple. Words meant more for herself than for the cat. "Easy there. Hold on. I am here." The pit was ringed by a rough lip of stone. Loose slabs lay inside like a broken staircase. If the lynx lunged and a slab slid, a leg could snap. Emma took a breath and pulled the pack off her shoulders. She yanked the straps free and knotted them until she had a short length of webbing. It would not hold weight like a rope, but maybe it could hold stones. She wedged one end of the straps under a projection, wrapped the other end around a fist-sized rock, and jammed the rock hard into a gap to build a step. She did it again and again, sweat dripping off her nose, hands gritty and shaking. Each time she pressed the stones, she tested them with her full weight. The lynx watched with wide, tired eyes. When Emma slid the last small slab into place, she backed up and lowered herself, palms open. "Come on, girl," she said, steady as she could. "Try the steps." The lynx put her weight on the lowest piece. It shifted, then held. She climbed higher, hauling herself up with her forelegs, claws scraping. Dust plumed. A stone popped, and Emma caught it with her forearm and shoved it back into the gap. For a moment the cat hung, both front legs hooked at the rim, back legs bicycling. Emma dropped to her belly and braced the loose edge with her shoulder. The lynx surged and scrambled, and then she was up, standing on trembling legs at the level of the trail. Emma wanted to step away, to give space, but she could not make herself move. The cat's breathing was harsh. Her ribs showed in a way that made Emma's chest ache. The lynx swayed, then turned without a sound and trotted toward the trees, not fast, not fleeing, glancing back once as if to check that Emma understood. Emma slipped the pack on and followed at a respectful distance. They left the terrace and cut through ferns and laurel. The ground grew soft underfoot. The lynx led to a blown-down tree whose root ball had ripped a mouth in the earth. In the shallow hollow below the roots, two small bodies huddled. Lynx kittens. One turned its head and made a thin sound, alive and seeking. The other lay on its side and did not lift its head. The mother stepped down, tucked herself around them, then looked up at Emma in a way that was not a threat and not submission either. It looked like a question she could not phrase any other way. Emma reached for her phone. A single bar flickered, faded, returned. She held it high. After a long stretch of static, a voice cut through, thin and far. "Ranger Station. Ryan speaking." Emma kept her words clipped. "Lynx. 2 kittens. 1 week. Mother exhausted. Old terrace above the East Loop." She heard Ryan say he was on his way. He asked if she had anything for warmth. She did. Emma opened her pack. She had a small metal bottle, a thermos of hot tea, a fleece. She poured hot water into the bottle, wrapped it in the fleece, and slid it to the edge of the hollow. No touching, no reaching in. The heat carried through the fabric. The mother lynx sniffed it, then nudged the weaker kitten toward the warmth. The little body shivered and pressed in. The air changed the way it changes before an afternoon storm. There was that metallic taste on the back of the tongue. Wind thickened. On the ridge, 2 hikers appeared, bright shirts moving against dark trees, and a big dog bounded ahead of them, loose and happy. Emma's heart slammed hard enough to make her vision stutter. She went up the slope, arms spread, voice calm but firm. "Please leash your dog," she said. "There is a wildcat down there." She kept her tone steady, not a shout, not a panic. The couple stared, then grabbed the dog's collar as it pointed and pulled and barked. Emma shifted her body to block their view. She kept talking, short sentences. "Sensitive situation. We are waiting for help. Thank you for helping by moving along." The man nodded. The woman apologized. The dog whined and threw a look over its shoulder, but they clipped the leash and moved away. When the sound of them faded, Emma let her knees go soft for a second and then went back down to the roots. The weaker kitten's chest moved a little more evenly. The mother closed her eyes and set a paw across both small bodies like a line drawn against the world. Emma checked the sky. The wind pushed a smell of wet rock across the clearing. Ryan arrived as the first fat drops hit the leaves. He came light on his feet and set a small crate down without stepping toward the hollow. He had a pair of thick gloves hooked to his belt and 2 narrow foam pads under his arm. He greeted Emma the way people greet each other on trailheads, a nod and a quiet "hey" that says we are both here to help. He crouched and stayed still long enough to look without staring. Then he spoke softly. "We need to move them before the creek rises. There is a shallow bowl east by the second switchback, high ground and cover. We can set a camera and give them space." He asked Emma to call Dr. Collins while he checked the creek. Dr. Collins answered on the second try. Her voice was clear and firm and kind. She wanted details. How old did Emma think the kittens were? Smaller than a house cat's head. Eyes open but cloudy. There was a pause, and then instructions spoken with that crisp cadence Emma trusted at once. Keep the mother in charge. Warmth without direct handling. Water only for the mother if she approaches voluntarily, and even then in tiny sips. For the kittens, no bottle, no milk substitutes. The priority is dry bodies and a place where night air will not steal heat. Ryan returned with wet hair and a plan. The creek was already louder than it had been. He had found boulders that could be rolled into a small causeway if they worked fast. They would not carry anyone. They would not chase anyone. They would simply shape the path so that a mother could choose the safest way across. The move to the creek was a study in patience. Ryan walked wide and slow, head turned a little, hands low. Emma did what he did. The lynx gathered both kittens under her belly, stood, and stepped in a straight line up the bank. She looked strong for a dozen strides, then stumbled. Emma stopped breathing until she saw the kittens still pressed to her underside. At the water's edge she hesitated, crouched, waited while the surface flashed white and slate. Ryan knelt upstream where the stones would break the strongest push. He placed one pad on a dry rock and then another on the next rock, not to make a bridge, only to make a suggestion. He did not look at the lynx. He kept his body turned and his movements slow. Emma waded to her calves on the downstream side and steadied with a pole. She felt the cold bite her skin through the fabric and kept her jaw locked to stop the chattering that might read as fear to an animal already far past the limit of fear. The lynx moved. She chose the spots Ryan had made safe, light as a breath on the first, a quick gather on the second, a long step to the bank. The kittens squealed once, tiny high notes, and then they were across. Emma followed last, knees trembling from the current, and climbed onto the bank gasping and laughing with that wild relief that feels like both crying and not crying. They reached the bowl as the rain pinned itself to the earth. It was a shallow place tucked into the side of the hill and covered with sword ferns and a lip of stone. Ryan set the small camera just inside the brush and left a circle big enough for an animal to feel uncornered. He put a flag farther down trail to keep other hikers well away. They sat near the lip, backs to the stone, water creeping down their sleeves. They did not talk much. Emma listened to the wet and to the small sounds inside the nest. She counted her breaths for a while to keep from climbing out of her skin with the urge to fuss and disturb what needed no hands now. When dark came, it came all at once, as it does in mountains when clouds lean down on the trees. Ryan offered a spare headlamp. Emma shook her head and let her eyes adjust. The rain eased in the middle of the night. Night air is honest. It will take warmth if you do not guard it. The kittens made that known in the only way they could. The weaker one started a thin cry that rose and fell like a line. The mother shifted and curved more tightly around them. Emma felt the sound in her bones. She took out the metal bottle again, refilled it from the thermos, re-wrapped it in the fleece, and slid it to the edge of the bowl. The mother's ears tipped toward her. Emma stayed still and lowered her gaze. After a minute, the lynx nudged the warmth closer to her kittens with careful, tiny movements of her paw. Emma felt something in her chest unclench. At dawn, the world smelled washed and new. Ryan checked the creek again. The water was high but steady. He radioed the station and logged the location. Emma called Dr. Collins and reported what she had seen. The vet listened and then asked whether the mother had tried to leave the kittens to hunt. She had not. Not yet. Collins suggested one more day of rest in the bowl before any attempt to shift locations. If the mother chose to move, they would let her choose. If she stayed and grew weaker, Collins could hike in with supplies and evaluate from a distance. They drank tea from the thermos. It tasted like tin and relief. Emma made herself eat half a bar. Ryan unrolled a paper map and traced a route with his finger. He talked softly about a spring farther up, a seep that stayed reliable even in heat, and about a stand of aspen that kept good shade in afternoons. Emma watched his hands and thought about how people who do hard things tend to move slower instead of faster, because fast breaks the wrong parts. They rotated into town in the late morning. Ryan headed for the station to file notes and pick up camera cards. Emma drove to the small store near the highway. She stood in front of a row of coolers and tried to choose the right size of plastic bottle, not for the water inside, but for the shape of it, for how it would hold warmth when the day turned to the long blue of mountain evening. She bought gauze and a roll of athletic tape, not to touch anyone, but to build better pads for the makeshift warmers. She grabbed a pack of trash bags to carry out the wet fleece when it had done its job. Back at the trailhead, she met Ryan at noon. The sun had come out hard, the kind of glare that bounces off rock and makes your brain hum. They hiked in with slow steps, rested when shade offered itself, and spoke almost not at all. When they reached the bowl, they stopped at the edge and waited for a cue that would say it was safe to come closer. The cue came in the form of silence. No growl, no flattening of ears. The mother lay with her head up. The stronger kitten suckled. The weaker one was draped across the mother's foreleg, eyes open, moving them in small jerks as if each blink learned something new about light. Emma set a warmer at the edge and pulled back. The mother watched and then ignored it, which was the best possible answer. In mid-afternoon, the air built toward heat thunder again. Ryan went to check the seep. Emma stayed and did small useful things. She moved a fallen branch so it would not poke the mother if she stretched. She set a line of small stones to divert a trickle that might have run under the nest if the sky turned mean. She stared at the outline of the kittens until she could see their ribs rise and fall without doubt. The first real test came when the mother stood and stepped away. She moved only a dozen paces downhill, but to Emma it felt like watching someone step away from a hospital bed. The mother drank from a shallow puddle that had collected in a rock depression and then laid down in a patch of sun, eyes at half-mast. The kittens raised their heads, then settled. Emma exhaled slowly. She kept her body still even though every part of her wanted to get up and build a better world around the tiny shapes in the ferns. Ryan returned with news that the seep was running and that there was a gentler route to it if they skirted the ridge. He had marked it with 2 pieces of flagging ribbon and a branch that looked like nothing if you did not know what to see. They made a plan that was simply patience dressed in steps. They would check the bowl in the late afternoon and again at dusk. They would leave when dark took the last sense from their eyes and return at first light. They would not touch the kittens. They would not feed them. They would give warmth and shade and the chance for the mother to be the one who solved the problem of her family. At dusk, a pair of hikers came along the lower trail with soft conversations and a camera on a strap. Emma went to meet them before they saw anything delicate. She kept her voice light, but she did not make a joke. "Sensitive wildlife near the ridge," she said. "Please take the long way down." One of them smiled the way people smile when they are happy to help, and they turned without asking questions. Sometimes the world is that easy. Night 2 was cold. The sky cleared. Stars made a mess across the black. When you sit outside long enough, you lose the idea that you are separate from the dark. Emma learned the small language of the kittens, the difference between the thin seeking sound and the sharp pop that meant discomfort and the little trills that sounded like contentment. She learned that the mother would rise if she shifted too fast, and that the mother would lie back down if Emma breathed slower. Before dawn, the weaker kitten had a spell where its breath stretched too far apart. Emma set the warmer close and looked away. After a long minute, the rhythm returned. When first light showed the pattern of ferns against the sky, she let herself lean back and let the stone take some of her weight. Morning brought a change. The mother rose, shook herself, and stared north with a focus that made Emma feel like she was watching a string get pulled tight. Ryan watched too, then nodded. "She wants the seep," he said. "We can make this easier without stepping in front." They moved down the edge of the bowl and along the contour line Ryan had scouted. Here the ground was a little flatter and the understory opened. Ryan shifted 2 fallen limbs that blocked a natural corridor. Emma dragged a dead branch to close a bad corner where a kitten could tumble. They worked like water shaping a channel. They were done in minutes. The mother gathered both kittens under her again and started. The route worked. She stopped at each pinch point and waited, then passed through, and by the time the sun cleared the ridge, they were at the seep. It was no more than a wet stain in a rock face with a slow drip into a shallow basin, but it was enough. The mother drank. The stronger kitten climbed her shoulder, slid, and climbed again. The weaker kitten sprawled like a rag across her paw, then roused enough to crawl toward the warmth of her chest. Dr. Collins met them that afternoon at the trailhead. She wore a pack and a wide hat, and the kind of calm that comes from long years of doing one careful thing after another. She walked in alone while Emma and Ryan waited at the switchback to keep traffic away. When she came back, her report was simple. "Keep doing what you were doing. The mother is thin but strong enough. The smaller kitten is on a ledge, but it is not falling." She left them a small roll of disposable pads and a note about not overusing warmth in daylight. She reminded them that wild means wild, even when your whole heart wants to push in closer. On day 3, the air went still in that way. That means heat is coming like a wall. Emma brought extra water for herself and a piece of shade cloth in case they needed to block direct sun for a short window. She had cut the cloth from an old car windshield shade and taped the edges smooth so nothing would snag. When the sun swung past noon, they used it once, for 5 careful minutes, anchoring it with sticks so they did not stand and cast a human shadow over the kittens. The mother watched, eyes half closed, then adjusted her body so the kittens lay deeper in her flank. Late that afternoon, a noise rolled up the slope that did not belong to water or wind. It was the heavy thump of rotor blades and the distant chop of an aircraft banking and turning. A rescue training exercise was running in the valley. The sound swelled and fell and swelled again as the helicopter practiced approach and retreat. The mother jolted at the first pass, then crouched, tail tight. Emma put both hands on the stone and kept them there. Ryan spoke low, a slow string of words with long spaces between them. After a while, the helicopter moved off, and the air went back to crickets and the tick of expanding rock. That evening, the stronger kitten tried to climb a slope and toppled backward, legs flailing. The mother caught it with one foreleg and tucked it under her chest, then placed a paw on the small head of the other kitten, as if counting both. Emma felt her heart smash up against her ribs and then learned, right there, how to let a thing happen without being the one to fix it. She breathed and watched and did not move. The kitten righted itself and squeaked indignation. The world did not end. They kept the routine. Morning checks, midday shade when needed, evening watch. A handful of times Emma wanted to leave and could not. She would start down the trail and get 20 yards away and then turn back because her bones said do not go yet. Each time she returned, nothing dramatic was happening, which is exactly what she wanted to confirm. She understood that day that rescue is sometimes the discipline to confirm peace and then walk away again. By the 4th sunrise, the smaller kitten did something new. It stood, wobbled, and took 3 steps without falling over. Emma laughed out loud and clamped a hand on her mouth. Ryan grinned the way he did when weather broke after a week of bad forecasts. The mother ate a moth and looked pleased with the universe. They decided then to reduce their presence to once a day. Wild families learn better when people are barely a rumor on the air. They set one more camera on the upper route and flagged the lower approach with a small notice for hikers to stay left for a week, just a gentle nudge that most people would honor. Then they left the bowl an hour before noon, walked out under a sky that smelled like stone and sun, and went their separate ways. A week later, Ryan sent Emma a message with 4 pictures. In the first, the mother stepped past the camera with a set of shoulders that no longer looked so sharp. In the second, both kittens followed, one close, one distracted by a fern. In the third, the smaller kitten had found its feet and was a blur. In the fourth, the mother looked straight at the lens with the kind of steady regard that never reads like a thank you and yet always feels like one. Life returned to normal in that tilted way it returns after you have watched something fragile come back from a thin edge. Emma went back to work, to a desk near a window that looked west. She ran in the evenings when the air cooled. She learned to carry an extra fleece in the trunk of her car out of habit. Friends asked about the hike, and she said it was a long story, and sometimes she told it, and sometimes she let the quiet be the answer. A month later, on a night warm enough that the air smelled like cut grass and tomatoes, Emma stepped out to her small backyard to shake crumbs off a tablecloth. The porch light threw a soft circle on the gravel. Beyond it the yard went to shadow, and beyond that the first trees began. Something moved at the edge of the yard where it met the woods. Not threat, not trespass, just presence. Two pale points glowed at knee height. Emma froze, hands still. In a slice of moonlight, the lynx appeared. Fuller now, stronger, close enough for Emma to see the white hairs in her ears and the dark brushstrokes on her face. She held there, silent, before slipping back into the forest like water downhill. Emma stood until her feet went numb. She didn't take a photo or call anyone. She folded the cloth, went inside, and laughed quietly, because joy sometimes exists without witnesses. The next morning, she hiked back with trash bags. The ferns had grown. Stones she once moved were buried in silt. The cameras were gone, the bowl empty. Wild had taken back its shape. At the parking lot, Ryan shared new photos. Kittens tumbling, the mother steady between them. Emma thanked him with only a nod. Driving home, the smell of sun-warmed pine filled her car. She understood the true shock wasn't just seeing the kittens. It was realizing how her body answered a plea without hesitation. Help had been careful, quiet, and left the world more itself than before. That night, she slept with the window cracked. Out in the dark, a family hunted and learned. Emma felt the echo of the creek on her calves, the weight of a warm bottle in her hands. She knew she had walked the line between doing nothing and doing too much. Later she would explain simply, move slow, keep your eyes soft, make the path safer, let the wild decide. She'd smile if asked whether the lynx had said thank you, and answer that wild things don't follow our loops. That moment of recognition had been enough. Weeks passed. The heat tipped toward fall. On the loop, moss covered the terrace stones where her knuckles had bled. A fern claimed the pit. She met a family with children and a dog, told them only to watch the creek and let them discover their own story. That evening she looked at the photo of a kitten mid-jump and felt warmth in her chest. Emergencies don't always make headlines. Often it's one person moving one stone, then stepping back. She made tea, listened to the yard settle, and went to bed with the window open. For a moment she was back by the bowl, counting breaths in the dark, learning to hold still. The world had asked her for something small, and she had given it. That was enough. And if another day someone hears a strange cry and chooses well, the thread between people and the wild will hold. Thin, strong, trustworthy.